through the talk. All right, everybody. So a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join me in this call where we're going to dive into the mystery and teachings of Mount Kurama. Now, as many of you probably know, I've just come back from my most recent pilgrimage and most recent journey to Kyoto. And on that tour, I was leading how many people? 13 people deep into the roots of the practice of Usui Reiki Ryoho. I was joined by my teacher, Hyakuten Inamoto Sensei, and we took many journeys up to Mount Kurama. And, you know, of course, Kurama Mountain or Kurama is the birthplace of Reiki, right? And all of the lineages or branches of Reiki that we might come across. I had some, this is a first for me. I don't know if anybody's heard this one. I just had a student today or a client of mine ask me if I have ever heard of laser Reiki. I've never heard. There's a new practice of Reiki, it seems like every single day, right? And so, that is what it is, and that's fine. But, to me, the practice of Reiki is quite simply Usui Reiki Ryoho. That's it, full stop. And I'll say that the reason why I practice and the reason why I'm dedicated to the practice of Usui Reiki Ryoho, and in particular Japanese Reiki, the Japanese practice of Usui Reiki Ryoho, like Japanese roots and so on, which we're going to explore some here today, is specifically for this one reason. Because when you get to the Shinpuden level, the master level, the whole point of the practice is Ansen Ritsumi, right, in Japanese. And so what that means is a still mind. So we're trying to find a practice that not only encourages us, but actually demands that we let go of the practice, if that makes sense, right? So, when I hear all these new lineages and branches and beliefs and Reiki and all of those things are framed here in the mind. And so, and this is kind of my Occam's razor for this. Occam's razor is the simplest explanation, is most likely the correct one. And my discussion on these new branches and lines it's not a criticism of them, but my question on it is this. If that lineage or branch or practice of Reiki exists, then Occam's razor for me here means that the person that created that branch, they must believe two things. A, that it's better than the branches before it, and B, that they somehow have that knowledge that other people don't have. You know what I mean? Like, those are two fundamentally almost unarguable positions, especially the one that is seeming that it's better than the ones before it, right? Because otherwise, why would you make the branch of Reiki up? And so why am I starting this talk with this? Because Ansen Ritsumi, the idea of a still mind, if we get lost in these different branches and topics and thoughts and all of those types of things, then our mind inevitably will be busy, right? It'll be more occupied with belief or with doing or with the practice. And, again, circling back to how I started on this, the thing that I love so much about Usui Reiki Ryoho in particular is that it's encouraging us to let go of Usui Reiki Ryoho, right? Let go of everything that's in the mind, because if this is busy, we can't heal, right? If this is busy, we stay fixated on the things that we think we need to heal from anyways. And so that might be part of our healing journey. This is why I'm saying I'm not trying to criticize any other branches of Reiki. We might need those things to find the courage to go deeper, to find the strength in ourselves. We all have weakness. We all have moments where we need to look to somebody like Usui Sensei, for instance. But what's the next step? The next step is to recognize that we are Usui Sensei. And then what's the next step after that? To recognize that Usui Sensei doesn't exist. Ansen Ritsumi, right? A quiet mind. So with all of that as my big opening to this talk, the mystery and the teaching of Mount Kurama, you heard me at the beginning say that, Usui Sensei had his enlightenment supposedly on Mount Kurama. Now, why do we say supposedly? Well, On his memorial stone in Tokyo, it's very clearly written that he went up to Mount Kurama, had 21 days of austerity on the mountain, which is most likely fasting and in meditation practice and so on. But is there any actual evidence of that besides what's written on the tombstone? There's not. There's no evidence, anyways, that my teacher has come across. There's no evidence that I've, people that I work with, like Justin Stein, or Olaf Bohm, or myself, or when I'm in Japan doing this research, there's no like photos of him there. There's no evidence of him being there on Usui Gongen. And I find that to be really, really beautiful, because if he was there, then it would be that much more difficult for us to practice Onsen Ritsumi, right? Because we might think like, well, this practice of Reiki, wow, I'll never be able to do it. I'm never going to be able to feel the same thing because I can't fast for 21 days on a mountain in the middle of nowhere. I can't go to Japan and do that. So how could I ever have this thing that we call Reiki? And to me, there's a really beautiful opportunity here to recognize, much like most figures in spirituality and religion, if we view them as facts, then it's unobtainable. If we view them as metaphor, then it becomes a mirror in many ways, if that makes sense, right? If we view the story of Usui Sensei and the story of Mount Kurama as a metaphor for your own journey, that's what Reiki is, right? It's your journey. It's not my journey if I'm your teacher, and I know many of you here, I'm your teacher, or if I was to work with you, or if you join me on a pilgrimage. It's not my journey to dictate where you go. You have to put each foot in front of the other, right? So the only thing that I can do is to be a neutral participant on your journey, right? And I think that's a really beautiful way to look at Reiki. If we look at Usui Sensei in that way, as a neutral aspect of you right now, sitting in Onsen Ritsumi, then that means when you get weak, right? And we all do. When you have a healing opportunity that's coming up and it's maybe too heavy or too scary or too intense or whatever it might be, and you need some neutrality and some strength, then you rest on the neutrality of Onsen Ritsumi. You rest on the neutrality of Mount Kurama, or of the story, the history of all of the practitioners behind you, if that makes sense, right? But if we view it as fact, well, then we view that, I mean, almost by default. And if somebody has a counter to this, I would very humbly love to hear it, because it would be part of my learning journey then, indeed. But almost as definition here, if we view that as fact, that means that me as the observer, I'm subservient to the one giving that information out. I put myself at a lower position. Oh, you're a Usui Sensei, so you must be able to heal me. Usui Sensei is Daikomyo, the light of the universe. You are the light of the universe. I am the light of the universe. Zoom, thank God, because it's working. It is the light of the universe, right? So to me, this whole thing, the mystery of this mountain, the mystery and the beauty of this mountain is opening up this story of, did he even go to Usui Gongen? I think he did. I'm not trying to say that he didn't, you know what I mean? But I find so much comfort and rest and peace in the ability to play with this idea that maybe we're talking about a ghost or a story. Because in reality, maybe I'm talking about myself at Usui Gongen, right? If anybody has been, I know everybody's camera is off, but if anybody has been to Kurama Mountain recently, give me a thumbs up, or take yourself off camera, off of without your camera, and just let me see, because you'll know what I'm talking about here. At Usui Gongen is the area on the top of the mountain that we're going to dive into here in a second, where Usui's purported enlightenment took place. And Usui Gongen literally translates into giant cedar tree. Okay. So there used to be a massive cedar tree here. And if anybody, again, if you've been there, you'll know what I'm talking about. Huge old tree that, this is now about 6 years ago. My date is not completely accurate, but about 6 years ago, a massive typhoon came through that part of Kyoto, right? And again, to me, this builds on to the beauty of the myth, the story of Usui Sensei, because this massive typhoon came almost 100 years after the start of Usui Reiki Ryoho, by the way. Something like 94 years after 96 years or whatever, after the start of the practice. And it carved out a path of destruction on the side of the mountain. It was a pretty heavy typhoon, or if you're in the United States, this would be like a hurricane, right? A pretty heavy one hit. But when you're looking at the mountain itself, 99% of it looks like it was unscathed. And there's one line that goes straight up the mountain to Usugi Gongen where all the trees are leveled. It's really interesting. And it's leveled all the way up to Usugi Gongen itself. So Usugi Gongen, the giant cedar tree, has fallen over and crushed the old temple complex, or the small shrine that was there at Usugi Gongen. Again, to me, that's feeding the idea of the mystery, right? It's like if we go there, and maybe you've seen this on my YouTube videos about the context when I was filming videos there on Usugi Gongen, I was making this point that if the shrine still existed, then we might think that, oh, Reiki exists in this shrine. It's almost like nature was like, take your belief and stop connecting it to this mountain. Find it in yourself. You know what I mean? And it was like we weren't doing that in many ways. And the Reiki world, I'm sure many of you this will resonate, or you'll know what I'm talking about. The Reiki world can be full of belief, right? Can be full of activity in the mind, full of story and superstition and things like this. And so it's almost like here we are 100 years later, and we're too much in the mind. So we need to destroy even Usugi Gongen. The mystery of the mountain, it speaks to us, right? That's really beautiful to me. It's really profound to me that this whole story is kind of coming together, as it were. So every time that I'm there at Usugi Gongen and on Mount Kurama, there's always something new to understand or something new to learn, because there's something new to learn in myself. Just like your journeys, right? You overcome whatever hurdle you're working on now, and you get to greener fields, right? You get to a peace or a place of tranquility. And then you look back, and hindsight is 2020, right? Everything is like, oh, it makes sense now because you've healed. You did it. You put one foot in front of the other, right? So let me build on this then by sharing the map of Kurama Mountain. And I think everybody should be able to see this. Scott, I've got you on my small window here, along with Kelly and Tracy. Can somebody just give me a thumbs up if you can see that? Perfect. All right. So here we are, the map of Kurama Mountain. And Usugi Gongen is right here, 37. Okay, I know it's a little bit small there, but that's it. That's Usugi Gongen. And so it's this general area that it's believed that Miko Usui had his enlightenment and sat in austerity for 21 days fasting. Don't know exactly where it was. We don't even know if it exactly happened. There's a lot of rumor that it would have been on some water features that are down a little bit more in the valley, maybe some small waterfalls that it was seated by. We don't know. But the beauty of this is that Usugi Gongen is at the top. I know it doesn't look like it on this map, but as you enter the main gate down here on the bottom right, which is number 1, and you traverse up the mountain, it almost looks like 36 and 35 are the top. They're not. It's 37. The Usugi Gongen area is the top of the mountain.
Hey, Bruce, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we can only see the thumbnails.
Ah, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see what's going on with that. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Please, everybody, let me know if you can't see these things. Let me see if this is going to do it. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Got the full map. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. All right, so let me go back over that quick discussion then. You can maybe see what I'm talking about here on the bottom right. Here's the main gate. Now, this is where most people enter. I was doing a lot of teachings down here by the main gate on Kurama Mountain, Kurama-dera. And as you traverse up the mountain, you arrive finally here at Usui Gongen, which is number 37. Now, this is again where Usui had his purported enlightenment. It may have happened somewhere generally in this area. Now, this is one of the things that I was looking at. And, for the sake of time on this call, there's definitely not enough time to get into all the mythology here that I'm going to be talking about in an upcoming seminar. I'm dedicating 4 hours in about 2.5 weeks to the mythology of the mountain here. But I want to give an intro to that because I think that it helps explain what's going on here on the mountain. And for me, and for the vast majority of people, if anybody's been there themselves in this call, I'm almost certain you would have entered through gate number 1. Everybody does. It's the main gate to the mountain. We continue all the way up to Usui Gongen. That's normal. But I was at Usui Gongen and I was like, what if we flipped it? What if we entered down here? If we entered down by the Kifune area down here at number 41 and we traverse backwards. Now, I think a lot of you have a practice of Usui Reiki Ryoho, right? Or at least, obviously, you're in the group. I'm pretty sure that's how you found out about this webinar. In Usui Reiki Ryoho, we have a discussion on the energy centers in the body called the 3 diamonds, right? And those 3 diamonds represent the earth, the heart, and the heaven. Now, in the mythology that I'm going to talk about in my upcoming next seminar, my webinar series, I'm going to be diving into this and explaining what's going on here on the mountain. But the earth energy itself is, from a Western perspective or from a yogic perspective, we could look at that as the root chakra, the sacral chakra, or the hara, and the solar plexus, the first 3 energy centers of the body. So very low energy, not in a negative way. I mean low as if it's connected to the earth, right? We're looking at the energy that is radiating up from the earth. Now, on Kurama Mountain, this energy is represented by a deity named Mao-san. Okay, Mao-san is like the protector of the earth and the harbinger of all life here on the planet. Kurama Mountain is a very interesting place because it is, maybe some people know this, and again, I'm going to get into this in the upcoming seminar. It's a breakaway mountain from the area in Japan. Okay, so there's many mountains right outside of Kyoto, and indeed Kyoto itself is such a spiritual place. These mountains are so spiritual. A lot of Buddhist roots in Japan and in Japanese society are in and around Kyoto. And of course, you had Kyoto as the capital of Japan back in the day, right? Back in the Meiji Emperor and all of this, of the Tokugawa shogunates and all of these like very historical things were taking place in Kyoto. So it was the heart of Japan in many ways. Kurama broke away from Buddhism in the 40s and started its own sect, its own kind of like quasi-mysterious religious faction that still has aspects of Buddhist practices, but they worship things that are kind of outside of Buddhism. And that all got me thinking about this pilgrimage from the reverse, okay? And keep this in mind with the 3 diamonds, the earth, the heart, and the heavens. As we go up from number 41 here, we're traversing up the backside of Mount Kurama. And we arrive here at number 40. This is the temple for Mao-san. This is Mao-san Dan. Okay, and so this is the area, and I don't know if you can see it, probably you can see that little shrine right there. That is the location that it is believed that Mao-san descended to Earth from Venus. Okay, now, again, I'm a very analytical person. I'm a very literal person. I used to teach astronomy and I used to teach, physics and economics and all that type of stuff. So I do love these stories, but, it's like he descended from Venus 6.5 billion years ago and has never aged because of a chemical difference in the atmospheres. That's the story. I think there's a beautiful metaphor going on here. But regardless of what happened and what didn't happen or what the metaphors are, it's a very, very spiritual place, a very heavy place, a very dense place. And it's very interesting here on the mountain because at number 40, right here around the shrine, there's these massive boulders everywhere. It literally looks as if somebody had just taken a huge foot or like a big hammer and just broken the earth open. There's like the earth has upwelled in this place. Now, did people build that? Maybe. I mean, it looks totally random. It does not look like it is planned in any way whatsoever. It looks like something very auspicious has taken place here. And so it got me to think, like, well, what is the significance to this? Okay, hold on. So Mao-san represents the earth, and the earth is, of course, the first diamond, right? So if we are looking at this then as the first diamond, well, then where do we go from there? We begin to traverse up the mountain again, and we arrive here at 38 and 39. Now, this within the practice of Reiki, Usui Reiki Ryoho, is, I just want to be conscious. I know that I'm saying a lot here for the sake of the recording, so if you have questions, please do write them down or keep them in mind, and I'll be going back over all of this. But these two areas right here, without getting into a huge amount of detail, because we could spend 2 hours talking just on 38 and 39. 38 is a temple to the deity Fudo-myo, who is the immovable wisdom king, and is the ability to burn through our fear and our resistance. He's the main deity of the Shugendo practitioners, right? So there's a lot to unpack with that. But number 39 right here across, this is there's a smaller shrine right next to Fudo's temple for Yutsitsuni or Yutsitsuni, excuse me, Yutsitsuni Do. And there's a massive cedar tree there as well. And Yutsitsuni is it did exist. We know he existed. There was complete factual records of this. He was a very well-adorned samurai, a very gifted warrior. And so this is very factual that we know he existed. But the lore goes that he was in Kurama Mountain. He had kind of left Kyoto and left the imperial court and was running away from persecution and stuff like that. Ended up here on Kurama Mountain and ended up down here at 38 and 39 and was dealing with the Tengu, right? And was dealing with the spirits of the mountain to face himself. And by facing himself, he was then able to conquer his biggest obstacles, his biggest limitations, his biggest fears, much the same as Usui Sensei did, right? And so why am I bringing that up here? Because to me, as I was traversing this, I was thinking, like, in the Reiki practice that we all share, you know, a lot of you would know we focus on the hara, churo tenden ho, right? The washing or the cleaning of the tenden, the lower belly, the hara itself. What are we trying to do here? We're trying to clean out our second mind, our guts. Many times you hear about our intestines as being called our actual mind or our driving mind. It's where our addictions are, our fears, all of that type of stuff is in the lower belly. And when we practice this cleaning of the lower abdomen, we're focusing on the lower belly. So left hand on the hara, right hand on the solar plexus in some ways, in some practices. And to me, it got me thinking about this duality between Fudo-myo and Yotsitsuni right here, the samurai warrior, right? In this fight, this internal fight that we all have within us, if that makes sense. We have to face our demons is essentially what I'm getting at here, right? So Mao-san becomes the earth. It becomes our strength. I'm going to do this. I'm going to stand steadfast in my practice. And I'm going to face myself. I'm going to do it. Here we go. And then you move up the mountain, right? You move up the mountain, which is the spine, the journey up the self. And where do we get to then after the root, after our core or our base of Mao-san, the strength of Mao-san? We get into the hara and the solar plexus. Anger, rage, fear, frustration. You know, think about like IBS issues, all of these types of things that we have in this area. All of that we have to burn through. We have to get courage in that part of our body, right? I work, you know, I think many of you know this about me, but if you don't, I live in France and then I also live part-time in Hong Kong. And when I'm in Hong Kong, I work at a Chinese medicine clinic And one of the things that we talk about here, and this is what got me thinking about this, is the movement of yin and yang. Okay. We are all yin and yang energy, all of us, right? We, regardless if you're identifying as male or female, it doesn't make any difference. We are all yin and yang together. We have that duality within us. And quite often when we're working, and when I'm working in the Chinese medicine space with Reiki, what we're looking at is the masculine of the solar plexus and the feminine of the hara needing to spin together to clean like a driving wheel in the lower part of the abdomen, right? If that makes sense. It's metaphoric, but from a Chinese medicine perspective, there's a lot of, this is kind of like the root of a lot of illnesses. Like there's too much fire, there's too much dampness, there's too much heat or wind or whatever. And all of that can be cured by moving either fire down to water or water up to fire. Now, I know that might be a little bit abstract for a lot of people, but just keep this in mind, the idea of focusing on the belly and working to calm down the hara and the solar plexus, okay? Because it really got me thinking, like, why is this here? Okay, so if we're looking to then clean out or balance Mao Sun, right? Well, then where do we go? Where do we go after we have our earth energy? Well, we go into the heart, right? We go up to the heart energy. That's the second diamond going up. We're going up the mountain, right? So we arrive up to the heart center. And the heart center now is represented by Kannon on Mount Kurama, or Kwanlin in traditional Buddhism, or in the West, it's the same energy as the Virgin Mary. And remember, I was saying at number 37 here, Usugi Gongen, it's the top of the mountain, right? As Mikao Usui was going up the mountain himself, he stopped at the peak to do his austerity. So he rose up Mao San, up the spine, to rest in the heart of the self and sit there with austerity. Sit there and wait and listen and breathe and work through whatever it is that he's trying to work through, right? When I started thinking about it like this, I was like, wow, okay, this is making, this metaphor has a lot of clarity now, because Usugi Gongen was literally the giant cedar growing out of that part of the mountain. So think about the cedar growing up your spine, right? The cedar tree itself, when it, and it still is represented as a kami, which is a deity, right? As like a representation of a deity. The cedar was the representation of Mao San. So the temple was there to pay homage to the location where he apparently, descended to earth. Usugi Gongen was him rising up or growing from the earth. Okay. So it made me think, like, this is really beautiful. If we think about it, the practice this way, that we are going to Usugi Gongen or bowing in Gosha to go over the heart center to find peace in the heart, right? Because if we find peace in the heart, then that means that we are able to find our, this is a Japanese term. I think maybe you've heard this, me talking about this in the URR group as well. We are able to find our kokoro. Our kokoro is our heart-mind awareness, or the lack of separation between the mind and the body, right? And here's what I mean by that. We're starting here at number 40, climbing up, overcoming our frustrations, our addictions, our anger, our things that are taking place in the lower belly, moving into the heart center, finding our stillness in the heart, right? Another way to look at this, everybody, would be to see the symbols at play. Seihi Ki is balance, right? So if we're bringing our hands to Gosho and recognizing balance, Seihi Ki, Seihi Ki, Seihi Ki, then that calms the body down, calms down the mind, and our kokoro, our heart-mind awareness, starts to open up. So now we are looking at diamond 1 and diamond 2 being connected, Mao San to Kannon. Okay, but then what's next? As you go from 37, then you descend down the mountain, down to 26, down to the main temple. Kurama. And right here on Kurama Temple, I think I have a photo of it. Again, please let me know. Can you see these? Awesome. This is the shrine here. I should have cycled through this, but this is the shrine that I was talking about for Yotsitsune. This is where the samurai got his enlightenment. That's the massive cedar tree I was talking about, which is a kami. This is representing his enlightenment, with the temple right next to him, which is the temple to Fudo Myo. So they're literally right next to each other, right? Here's our group when we were at Usui Gongen. So there's Inamoto Sensei, and you can just see Usui Gongen right back there, the tree that's fallen down on the side. It's literally this big. The shrine or the old temple used to be over here. And then as we get down to Kurama, this is the main temple. And this right here is the power point, or the radiant point of energy on Kurama, which is this. Okay, so this is the radiant point right in front of the main temple. This is on the most recent fire ceremony, the full moon ceremony that we were at a couple weeks ago. And I brought this photo here because I wanted to give this idea of the movement through the three diamonds. Okay, so Mao-san representing the earth, Kenon and Usui Gongen representing the heart. Well, where are we going for the mind? Where does the practice for the mind come in? This is Bishop Montan. This is the illumination of the universe. And Bishop Montan is very well revered on Kurama Mountain. I think you might be able to see. No, you can't see here in the photo, sorry, but just to the left and to the right are two lions. The lions represent Bishop Montan and the lions that he brought with him. And here on this radiant point right in front of the temple, you can notice there's a triangle here, right? This triangle represents the triple diamond system. Okay, so we have the universal energy here, the heart energy, and then the earth energy. And then further, it's difficult to see it because it's illuminated, of course, by all the candles, but there's 6-pointed star around the outside. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, the Star of David. I know it's difficult to see because of the candles illuminating all of the lines. If you look at it without the candles there, then you can see it a lot more clearly. Actually, I can show you in this photo here. It's a lot more clear. You can see it's not, the outlines are not as strong with the candles. So what's going on then with these 6-pointed stars and our triple diamond system? What are we trying to elicit from these mysteries of the mountain? Well, the 6-pointed star here represents the delusions of our senses. So it's our sight, our taste, our touch, our hearing, our mind, and our body. So those are the six ways that we would communicate or experience our world, if that makes sense, right? And in all 6 of those, everything that we experience in any one of those realms, sight, taste, sound, body, mind, whatever it might be, all of that is a function of our mind. All of it, right? You're listening to me right now, so your sense of hearing, your vision, I hope you haven't fallen asleep. I can't see everybody, but I hope you're still there. These things are actively engaged. So you're paying attention. So your mind is occupied by the talk. So if it's occupied by the talk, then we can't be in a state of ansun ritsumi, of a still mind, right? Now, obviously, we're not trying to be there all the time, but in our practice, that's the goal. And that's what this center point here is trying to elicit. And Kurama itself, the main temple, is dedicated to not to Bishop Montan, or not to Kenon, and not to Mao-san, right? But to Sonten, the deity Sonten. And Sonten represents the space beyond the self, the space beyond the triple diamonds, if that makes sense. So let me show you further here on this photo. Imagine if you're walking about your normal everyday existence, right? You're just doing your normal things. We are then in the space of duality, right? You're always in the space of duality. So as you go out about your normal workday or whatever it might be, you are occupied by maybe your sense of hearing or touch or taste or sight or mind or body. Does that make sense? So you're occupied here by this constant cycling through our environment. Well, what if that cycling slows down? What if it starts to stop? This is what we feel, hopefully, when we're practicing Reiki, right? We let the external world, I guess what I want to say, to get quieter, to dissolve away. And if it dissolves away, well, what are we left with? The three diamonds, right? Mao-san, Kenon, and Bishop Montan. We're left with the earth, the heart, and the mind, right? But what if we can let go of those? What if we can't feel the body? What if we let go of the heart? And what if we transcend the universe? And many of you have probably felt this, you know, that moment when this is how it feels to me anyways, when you're giving Reiki and it's like, oh my God, what was that? Like you feel like reality kind of jolts you back into existence. That's what I'm kind of alluding to in my own experience. Yours might be different, probably is more profound, but that's still the same thing, right? We're trying to transcend the three diamonds. If we transcend those, we become Daikomyo, the master symbol, right? The symbol of light moving through us, right? And that's what this triangle represents. So we stand in the middle of this triangle here so that we can allow ourselves the moment of being in the center of our heart, our body, and the universe. If that makes sense, right? So if we are in the middle of the trinity of those three things, then what are we? We're Daikomyo, right? But the master symbol, the Shimpiden, right? The mystery teaching is we are not the teaching of Reiki. We are not the teaching or the healing practice of Reiki because we're not just Daikomyo, but in reality, we're Ansen Ritsumi, a quiet mind. Because if our mind is quiet, then we are all things simultaneously. There's no separation, right? And I think it's really beautiful here on Kurama Mountain. It's a pretty safe bet of saying that here because you can see like there was probably 200 or 300 people here at the fire ceremony. There was probably 30 foreigners, something like that. I would say with almost absolute certainty that those 30 foreigners were all Reiki practitioners. I would say that with almost absolute certainty. And now there's a decent chunk of Japanese, and you know, Reiki is becoming a lot more popular now in Japan, thankfully. It's coming back home, that are there for Reiki and that are understanding Reiki and so on. But I think one thing that's so beautiful about the mountain is most people there would be like, what is Reiki? I don't know what that is. Because it doesn't make any difference. At some point, Ansun Ritsumi is found by surrendering past the triple diamonds. So if we surrender the idea of healing, then where's the need for Reiki anyways? You know what I mean? Like, we still need to do our practice every day. We still need to live within the precepts. We still need to climb the mountain, climb Kurama every single time we sit down for our practice. We still need to go through Mao-san and then rise to Kenon and then go to the third diamond, to the crown, to the universe, so that we can finally let go of all of that. And maybe just for a split second, we can feel Sonten, or the oneness of Reiki, the universal oneness of Reiki, right? And I think that's the best way to describe that is in this 10 ox drawing. Now, I'm conscious that maybe it's a little bit difficult to see. I'll describe this. And if anybody has a practice of Zazen or of Buddhism, this might be very familiar to you. This is a 10 ox drawing, and it's a discussion of a boy trying to find the ox, right? And really, it's a fable for Satori, or enlightenment. And I hope that as I describe this to you, then the journey up Kurama Mountain might make a little bit more sense as to how I'm putting this together. So this is us, a little boy, a little boy trying to find the ox. And the ox represents nirvana or onsen ritsumi, or a clear mind, right? A peaceful mind, a mind that is not trivialized by duality. And so that's why we're constantly looking for it, because we live in the world of duality, right? So we can't constantly be non-dualistic because our very nature is dualistic. So that almost forces us to climb the mountain again and again and again and again. That's why I started this talk by saying the presumed enlightenment of Usui Sensei. If we knew he was there, if we had a video, for instance, like if Zoom existed then, and we had a live footage of him doing this, well, then like, we would go back to, like, oh, I can't do that. I can't take 21 days off of work. So if that's what it takes to be a Reiki practitioner, I'll just quit, because there's no way, I can't do it. It's gonna be too difficult. Maybe some people would be able to do it. Most people would give up. But in reality, this is the story of Mikei Usui. We are all searching for the ox, our enlightenment, right? So we go through life, we find, the friction here, the negative statements from your friends there, the difficulty of work or your relationships or whatever it may be. While I was in Japan this most recent time, I was very fortunate enough to sit with Hiroshi Doi, so Doi Sensei of Gendai Reiki, and take all of his classes. So sat with him through all of his trainings. And it was a very beautiful experience. It helped me to solidify my practice of Usui Reiki Ryoho for sure. It's the very similar practice, right? It's still very much rooted in Japanese fundamental roots of Reiki. One thing that he said that, of course, many of you heard, and it was one of those moments where I've heard it so many times, but then it finally clicked, was he just very poignantly stopped in the middle of his talk and looked at everybody, and he's like, everything in life is a hint. It's a message. You have to pay attention to everything that's coming up, right? Nothing is random. And so that describes this next step here. So many people spend like a pinball going around a pinball machine, not knowing why we're getting hit in that direction, this direction, and getting, knocked over by life and whatever. We can never find even a glimpse of the ox, because we're blaming work, or we're blaming our friends, or we're, accusing them of this, or saying that we're sick, saying that we need all these things all the time to help us and everything. But what if we start to let all of those things settle down a little bit, start to become just a little bit more quiet? If we start to do that, if we start, like how Doi Sensei is saying, if we start to recognize that, wow, maybe the people at work are trying to tell me something, or maybe my friends are actually angry at me because of something I need to fix or whatever, right? Then we get to picture number 2. We start to see these elusive footprints, like, well, what is that? So the boy who is looking for his Satori now finally finds the first evidence of that Satori. He finally finds, like, wow, okay, hold on. If I'm just a little bit more polite, then things go a lot easier. So let me start being more polite. Or maybe this sounds like the precepts in action, right? The most important practice in Reiki, hands down, 100%, is daily recitation of the precepts. Usui Sensei said this himself. It's said in the Gakkai. So the Gakkai is the organization that he set up. The Gokai are the precepts themselves. In the Gakkai, it's stated morning practice and evening practice of the 5 precepts. Recite them daily, the most fundamental practice. Because if we do that, we can start to see maybe these footprints. And if the footprints are visible of our Satori, then hold on, our path up Mount Kurama becomes a little bit more clear. Like, oh, wow, okay, hold on. I think I'm figuring it out. If I'm more kind, if I'm more grateful, if I'm more loving to all things, if I do my work honestly, if I don't respond in anger and worry, then I start to see more of these footprints. But as soon as I'm angry, I'm angry again, or I'm worrying again, or I'm combative again, the footprints go away. So I'm going to stay in the precepts. And not only am I going to see more footprints, but I'm going to catch my first glimpse of the ox, of my satori, of my enlightenment. I'm going to rise into Mao-san and maybe feel the first diamond. Like, wow, okay, there's something happening here. I'm looking inside for the first time. I'm really looking into these diamonds. I'm really looking into the core of myself to find stillness. Because everything is a clue, everything is a hint. And then as soon as you start to get an image of your satori, you move on and you try to catch it. You try to wrestle with it, right? The ox, remember, is the satori, it's the enlightenment. And in order to get there, you're not wrestling the ox because the ox is your enlightenment, it's your true self. You're wrestling your own resistance, right? I always laugh about this because part of my resistance, and I'm sure many of the people who are listening, this will resonate. When I get into that level of stillness, that little boy wrestling with the ox comes right back up because I'm like, oh, that was it. That peacefulness, that was, oh, now I'm out of it again. I'm wrestling back with the ox. So I've got to start over again and again and again and again. But what we do then, once we've wrestled the ox and we have calmed down our diamonds, maybe by the precepts or by utilizing the symbols or by looking at the symbolism that I'm trying to convey here in the journey up Mount Kurama into Sonten, into Daikomyo, then we become harmonized with the idea of our enlightenment. We're able to become one with that, right? We can move together. And then we get into the sixth drawing here, where our body, our mind, and our true self are working in harmony. So this is if you want to think about it like this, it's again a representation of the Trinity, right? Our true self, our mind, and our body. Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Same thing, right? And if we are able to then rest, right? Rest in this, wow, hold on a second. I can bow and goshao. Look, feminine, masculine, non-duality over the heart center. I can breathe through the nose, Joshin Kokyoho, spirit and soul cleansing breath. I can breathe through the heart center, down into the root, up through the mind. I can feel the body. I can rest, right? I can rest. So that means that my true self is going to become more visible or more, how do I want to say, tangible, because the separation of my body is going to become less aware, right? My ego is quieted down. And so our true self comes up. Now, if we stay with that, and like I was saying, when you get up to Kurama-dera, to the main temple, what is it trying to get you to imagine? It's trying to get you to imagine a step beyond, right? If we stay, like the example that I just gave, if we stay in a prayer of Father, Son, Holy Ghost, or Mao, Son, Kenon, Bishop Montan, if we stay within the precepts and all of this, then we're staying in our practice. And that's not a problem, but there's still two more steps, right? So this is staying in the practice, being at harmony with the body, mind, and the soul. That's amazing. That's incredible. Most people are here. Our practice helps us get here. The precepts help us get here. And then it is up to us to get here, where the ox disappears, right? Because you become your satori. You recognize the feeling of daikomyo. Many of you may have felt this by a feeling of energy moving up and down the spine, right? A feeling of serenity and peace in the mind and the body when you're practicing. Back to the very beginning of the talk, this is why I was saying, the thing that I love about Usui Reiki Ryoho is we have to cultivate a still mind. If we're constantly thinking about, the crystals and the meditations and the hand placements and the psychic surgery and the angels and the channeling and the this and the that and all these types of things, or our sickness and the healing and all of these things, then we can never get down here. We're still wrestling with the ox, always wrestling with the ox. A lot of times everybody normally is here. Reiki allows us to bring this journey forward, but the mind or the entrapment of the story, like I was saying, all these new, lineages of Reiki and stuff, most often that's going to entrap us here. If we let the mind go, then we surrender into the peaceful unification of all three bodies. And then we allow the idea of our Satori to become normalized in the body, to be let go of, right? But what's the last step? The last step in this journey is represented at Kurama of Sonten, the deity beyond the three diamonds, right? And that is recognizing nothing. So in this image here, in the seventh image, the boy still exists, right? The ox is gone because he's recognized his Satori. He's at peace. You can see that he's praying maybe to Bishop Montan or whoever it may be, but he still exists. So there has to be a moment of serenity, of surrendering past the self, right? That is full enlightenment. That's full Satori. This is Mike Usui's great Reiki. When he finally let go of himself, and there's a big discussion on this. Again, we don't have the time in this. I'm going to be covering it in my upcoming seminar of his 21 days of austerity. Did he push himself right up to the brink of death? Maybe. In order to find this? Maybe. It's part of the journey, right? As you find Satori, then you glide through the river of the universe, Daikomyo. You flow with the energy of all things. You simply are. So here again, there's no, like the idea of saying Honjaze Shone to send Reiki doesn't make any sense because you already are Reiki, right? You're just allowing us to fully breathe and be with everything, moving with everything. And then I really like the last one. I think the last one is the most important because this is where in many approaches, this is where gurus get stuck. People who have a belief about themselves. You have to come down the mountain, right? You journey through Mount Kurama to journey up to the heart, to find the resistance in the self, to find the friction, find the pain, find what needs to be released. We all have to release something. We're in this embodiment. So we're not done yet. That's the great kicker. All of us have to release something because we still have a body, right? So we have to release something. So we climb the mountain to find the fear. We go to the temple to release into Sonten. And then we descend down the mountain to teach, to share, to help, to give selflessly, right? To walk with others, to hopefully recognize what Doi Sensei was telling all of the people in the training, that nothing is coincidental, right? Everything is a hint. So all of you in this talk and everybody that I come into contact with and everything that happens to me every single day, I hope that I'm viewing that as evidence from my teachers as to what my journey needs to look like. So I need to go back up the mountain, find my next level of truth about myself, heal the next thing, and come down the mountain and sit in front of my teachers and give thanks, if that makes sense. You know, the great statement, maybe I'll misquote it here, but it's, what is it? Your greatest teacher is your biggest enemy, something like that. All right, it's a really beautiful context here as to what I'm talking about. They're your enemy because they're trying to help you learn about yourself, to go back up the mountain, find your Satori, climb through Maoson, climb through Kenon, right? Climb into the third eye or the crown or the universal energy, the top diamond. Let go, surrender everything that you're struggling with, and then descend back down to figure out what your next journey up the mountain is going to be, right? This to me is a really beautiful way to look at this story of Mount Kurama, to look at this journey up and down the mountain. And, you know, it's really profound. It's profoundly beautiful to be on the mountain in the story, steeped in all of the desires and earnest wishes and energy of practitioners that have been on Mount Kurama, and all the monks and all the pilgrims and everybody who is practicing to Sonten or Bishop Montan or Mao-san or all the deities there, because they're all trying to help you find your Satori. right? They're all helping each individual person to arise into their true self. And to me, that's the essence of Mikao Usui, right? That's the essence, the real essence of this whole story. Let me take this as an example. I've got how many people here? 30 people at the moment. So let me put it like this. I think this is a really beautiful way, and I'm sure a lot of you will chuckle at this. I think this is a really beautiful way to look at it. I view this as like a job interview. Like all 30 of you are my teachers, right? And all of you are here to help me find another aspect of my satori, of my enlightenment, of my surrendering of the self, right? And so what can I do beyond be infinitely grateful for all of your assistance on that journey, right? This is what Doi Sensei, I think, is talking about. Everything is part of my journey, just like it is, everything is part of your journey as well, right? So everything that I'm telling you here, if you hear it today or you hear it on the recording or you hear it in 10 years, it doesn't make any difference. It's all part of you trying to find your satori so that you can let go. Because when we all let go, right, when there's that moment of satori, of stillness in my body and my mind and my heart, where's the suffering? What exists in that moment, right? None of you exist. I don't exist. My family doesn't exist. The universe doesn't exist because everything is daikomyo. Everything exists at peace in that one moment, right? There's an aspect of this that I'll share very quickly. I think it's really quite beautiful. Usui Sensei was a Tendai Buddhist monk, Pure Land Buddhist monk as well. So Tendai Buddhism and Pure Land Buddhism, a lot of overlap, very, very prevalent in the area around Kyoto. And in both of those lineages of Buddhism, there is a central deity called the Amitabha Buddha. The Amitabha Buddha is the Buddha of the Pure Land. And this is kind of my closing point here before I bring this over to Q&A, and we'll have about 20 minutes or so for Q&A. The Pure Land, if you look at any seated Buddha that is the representation of the Amitabha Buddha, the mudra for, and I've shared this before in my videos, it's very quite easy to do. If you all remember how to do this as kids, remember the little glasses that we used to make as kids like this? Like, remember we used to do this? So in order to make the Buddha, the mudra for the Amitabha Buddha, you take the glasses and then you just flip them over. So I'm conscious of the screen, but it's like this. I've got a camera that follows me as I move, so it's going to be very difficult to do this. But an okay finger like this, okay finger like this, and then you place them together so that the fingers are pointing upwards, right? So here's my index finger and my thumbs, and they're pointing upwards, right? Exactly. I see a lot of you've got that. Now you hold that over the hara, over the lower belly. And why am I bringing that up here? Because remember what I was saying at the beginning of the talk about the small temple to Fudo Myo and the associated shrine to Yitsutsuni, to the samurai warrior. He went there to find his enlightenment as a samurai by facing the resistance in the lower belly, right? If anybody has a background in psychotherapy, for instance, I don't want to go on a tangent on this, but if anybody has a background in this, there's a very strong discussion that we spend our entire life healing from the things that we suffer from as kids, right? And if we think about the earth energy, the lower chakra energy, right? The lower three chakras, that's our child energy, right? That's where we are. That's where we hold those wounds, right? So we need to dive into that to heal it. So again, I don't want to go on a tangent on that for the sake of time, but why am I bringing all of this up? Because this mudra is held on the lower belly by the Amitabha Buddha. And the whole point of this is to create the Pure Land. The Pure Land is the area of the solar plexus and the sacral, or the hara, in unity. It's the movement of yin and yang spiraling together. If you think about the yin and the yang symbol, it implies movement, right? It's swirling together, right? If you think about this, I don't have a photo of it on me here, but if you think about that together, the black and the white are moving into each other. And so it spirals, right? If it spirals fast enough, meaning if there's no resistance, then it will become one. It will become unified. That makes sense. It's spinning on itself. So if you think about the sacral, the hara moving into the solar plexus, and the solar plexus moving into the hara, so the masculine and the feminine keep churning together. Again, tenden chiroho, right? Moving into the tanden. Then what are we doing? We're recognizing the pure land, the stillness in the guts, the stillness in the lower belly. And the point that I want to make on all of this is that this is a central figure to the practice of Reiki, the Amitabha Buddha. So why is that important? Because we need to cultivate stillness in the earth energy or in those lower chakras. And there's a very, very beautiful line in the evening prayer to the Amitabha Buddha. It's in the Amitabha Sutra. It's in the recitation of the vows to the Amitabha Buddha. And it says this, it says, if I should gain complete enlightenment, but anybody else in the entire universe has not obtained enlightenment, then may I never obtain enlightenment. Which essentially means everybody else first before me, right? Everybody else first before me. And why is that beautiful, and why am I ending the speech on this? Because if I have a belief that I'm somehow enlightened, then that means I'm not. It means I'm fighting with the ox, right? But if my mind and my body and my soul and my spirit are quiet, if I recognize Ansen Ritsumi, then I simultaneously recognize the enlightenment of everything in the universe, because that's Daikomyo. And only then, at that moment, might I find my actual enlightenment, might I find my journey up and down the mountain, right? We can't have we can't have the self before the whole, because the whole is the self. The ego wants to flip that story, right? So I think that the mysteries and the teachings and the whisperings and the history and the culture of Kurama Dera, of Mount Kurama, really helps us to understand the depth of the practice, the ability for us to get out of this idea that I'm healing, that I'm giving energy, that I'm going to do this thing to somebody else. There's another layer to it, right? Again, all of that mythology and that backstory and the meaning of the Tengu and a Fudomyo and all of that stuff I'm going to be diving into in my upcoming 4-hour seminar. It's way too much to be talking about here, but that's spread over 2 sessions. So if you're interested in that, there'll be more details into the group. But I want to take a second, step back, allow everybody to bring their questions if you have any. And I'm very, very happy, of course, to open this up. I'm very appreciative that I'm probably pushing a lot of new things in here, maybe things that people haven't heard before. So I'm very, very happy to clarify or answer any questions that you may have. Put me on the hot seat. You're my teachers anyways. Let's see how I'm doing. Come on. Just go ahead and unmute yourself. And if you want, you can also take your, turn your camera on when you ask a question as well, but please go ahead. Hey there, Scott.
Thank you so much for this.
Having difficulty hearing you there, Scott, I think a little bit. I heard the thank you and I'm very appreciative of that. Let me see if I can hear you better.
And let's see, let me try something else. I'll get back.
Yeah, let me take a different question and we'll come on back to Scott. Piper, did you have a question there?
I don't know if mine is a question. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely, yep.
It's an acknowledgement. Like I really just there's so much here to really deepen our understanding, and so I'm very, very appreciative. About the past 6 months, I've been trying to look at Reiki in a different way than how I learned it here in the West. And I'm really spending time really looking at, perhaps how I believe Sensei Usui intended this as a practice for ourselves.
Mm.
Instead of we jump to, oh, I'm a healer, I'm gonna help others. It's like, how can we help others until we really spend that time on ourselves? So I've been spending a lot of time with really this focus and practice on the three diamonds, which I never heard before about the past 6 months, and working with Bronwyn, Logan, and Franz Stein, and these guys. So I appreciate your discussion around the mountain, and you're just helping really deepen my understanding. Again, I don't think I have a question here. It's really a reflection. Really powerful stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And your journey is, I'm sure, shared by everybody here, right? We all, with anything that we're learning, we are all learning it, and then we're deepening our learning. And then as soon as you deepen it, you uncover new fields and new simplicity, right? So thank you. I'm very grateful for that. And I'm very grateful that you're here. All right. Anybody else? Scott?
Hi, Bruce. Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, I think that's going to do it.
Yeah. Okay. All right, great. Thank you again so much for this wonderful journey. Is My question is, you know, if we look at Daikomyo as the symbol, um, and we use our practice with Seiheki, Chokurei, Honshaze Shonen, and we teach our students these symbols. In your experience, what is the point of teaching symbols at all?
At the Shimpuden level, there is no point in the symbols, hopefully, right? Hopefully, we can get to a point where we let them go. Now, here's the way that I teach it in brief. My courses, this is a very in-depth topic, so I'll try to answer that as briefly as I can, but with as much depth as I can. Everything is internal. Everything is internal, right? Reiki is an internal practice. The symbols are an internal journey. The precepts are all internal. Nothing external exists. Everything external is just a representation of what I need to fix internally. Okay. So when we are struggling with our practice, or we're struggling with the mind or whatever, then why don't we recognize Chokure over the body as a way to scan the entire body, as it were, the mind to the feet, or the physical form, and look for resistance. In the West, Chokure is talked about as empowering energy, as a way to make Reiki stronger. But that doesn't make any sense, because it's like Reiki is the energy of the universe. So what I say quite often is, if anybody knows their superheroes, unless you're Thanos from the Marvel universe and literally control the energy of the universe, then this discussion on Chokure makes no sense. We can't make the energy of all things stronger. That's like the most egotistical thing I think that we could say. So what does that mean, though? Well, if we are the energy of all things, if we are Daikomyo, then how can Chokure make that stronger? It makes it stronger because it helps us to identify the areas in us that are resisting our true self, right? Maybe a muscle pain, maybe a belief, maybe a trauma, maybe fatigue, maybe too much coffee, maybe whatever it is, doesn't make any difference. We scan the body with Chokure. We identify problem number 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, right? Once we've identified those, we come together with Seihiki, balance. This idea of, like I was saying, with the hara into the solar plexus, right? The feminine into the masculine. Okay, balance. So is my digestion hurting? Maybe I need more focus on the solar plexus. Maybe I need to recognize there's a resistance here and sit with it and allow the body to go back to equilibrium. That's balance, right? If we get the mind out of the way, this is again an axiom of the universe. If we don't any system in the universe will find balance if left to its own devices. It's one of the laws, right? I think of thermodynamics. So if we don't put energy in to any system, it will reach equilibrium. So if we simply sit in our pain and focus on chokure through the body, okay, there's our pain. Perfect. I figured it out. I feel it. Seihiki, 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 seihiki. Eventually there will be balance, right? Okay. So now there's balance. Now what? Okay. Well, this is like the boy taming his ox. So we are no longer fighting with the ox. Now we're sitting on the ox. The ox and the boy represent Honjaze Shone. They represent the light within me that is also within you. The idea of sending Reiki over distance by something that we have to invoke in a symbol doesn't make sense because Reiki is already everything. So there is no time and distance involved, right? So we need to recognize that our true self and our physical self are one, Honjaze Shone. Because as soon as I do that, then Scott, I recognize, hopefully, that I'm also you. And then what do? Well, then there we are. So now we can connect via distance over Reiki. And then what do we recognize? We recognize number 7, I think it is, in the ox, the 10 ox drawing of Satori, Daikomyo. And we sit in Daikomyo until inevitably we come back to looking for the ox again. Where did it go? Because I'm struggling again. And now we chokure, seihiki, honjaze shone, Daikomyo. Here I am at Daikomyo, rest until we have to go back. Right. Hope that makes sense. Yeah, perfect. There's so much more to it, right? I mean, but I think in my Okudan class, I think this is like 2 hours worth of instruction. But I'm trying to condense it down. So hope that helps. All right, who's next? Come on, don't be shy. I'm going to start. Look, I used to be a teacher, so I just want to warn everybody. When I was a teacher and nobody had a question, guess what we do? We call on people. I'm not going to do that here because we're all adults, but I'm going to threaten you with it. Anybody else? Thank you for that comment there, Sakwe. I appreciate it. Yeah, feel free saying that, as she starts to teach Reiki as well, then this is going to be things that you can let stew around in your own understanding of your own practice and teach, right, to your students. Hopefully we teach from the precepts. Hopefully we teach from the integrity of the precepts, and we teach from the integrity of our own learning and our own journey as well, right? I think this journey to Kurama for me was number 6 or number 7. And why? Like, I don't know how many times I've gone through all of the trainings again. I've sat with them with Inamoto Sensei probably 4 times now. I'll probably do it again in a couple months. Why? Because we have to climb the mountain and then go back down the mountain. Why did I sit with Doi Sensei? Because I needed maybe to hear him just say that everything is not coincidental. I've heard that a million times, but maybe I just needed to hear it that one time. And that one little nugget of information makes the whole thing worth it, right? So we keep learning, right? Like you're doing here and being part of this conversation. There's a question here. Yeah, I know, Scott. Thanks for pointing that out. I thought I gave up my teaching career, but I'm never going to take that hat off, I guess. But I love it, though. It's my main archetype. All right, so please, this is from Elaine. Please explain Honjaze Shone again. Confused about it. So this idea of the mind and the body, if I'm stuck in the awareness of the mind and the body, maybe it's physical pain, maybe it's even the idea that I'm giving a Reiki session, right? Like this is happening all the time in the Reiki world. I feel the boyo-san in the client, right? So I'm scanning the boyo-san, or I'll feel this thing. Even the idea of scanning the boyo-san is belief, right? It's the belief in the self. It's the belief in the mind, because that's still interpreted by the body. So as we scan the body and feel something, that's fine. I'm not criticizing that. But what I would say then is you put your hands there, and then you need to find stillness, because otherwise you're interpreting, right? And then it's whose journey of healing is it then? It's now becoming my resistance on their journey in many ways, right? So neutrality, always neutrality. So if my hands are on the individual, and I find neutrality in my body, that means chokure is satisfied because everything is still. That means honjaze shone is satisfied. Excuse me, seihiki is satisfied because I'm in gassho. Even with the hands on the person, I'm still bowing in gassho, right? Because I'm hopefully in non-duality. I'm hopefully just resting in the practice. So if those two things are met, well, then what am I? If my body and my mind are quiet, then the initial illumination of Daikomyo starts to come forward, which is Honjaze Shone, which is this idea that I might finally start to see that I am no different than the person on the table. See what I mean? Like there's no separation between us. There's a video on my YouTube channel about this where I'm saying, what if we recognize that the person on the table, what they're healing is what I'm actually healing from or working through as well? You know what I mean? Like there's no separation. So there must be a reason that this is happening. So if I see the person on the table as myself, isn't that the definition of Honjaze Shone? Right? Continuing on that, if I see the person on the table as myself, then I'm no longer viewing it in a dualistic mindset, practitioner-client, right? The term Reiki master versus client, like all of those things are very loaded statements. Healer versus sick. We're all sick. We all need healing. So all of that needs to just go away because that's all belief, right? So if all of that softens, then we are Honjaze Shone. So in what I mean here is that if I recognize, Elaine, that I am you, and if you can recognize that you are me, well, what does that really mean? That means that we are stepping into Daikomyo, the energy of all things. And we're surrendering into Satori. It's like the step before our Satori, Honjaze Shone. Right? It's the last step of the mind, because I'm still interpreting that, oh, wait, maybe I am the person on the table. Maybe she's me and I'm her. Or maybe the thing that I feel in the Boyo-san is what I'm actually trying to go through, because she's a representation or he's a representation of my journey. Okay, well, what if we take away the journey? Then what are we? When you take away the Boyo-san, what are we? Daikomyo. Right? So we go all the way down, and then all the way back up again, and then all the way down again, and all the way back up, as many times as we need to. Reiki's a daily practice until we die. The biggest test is when we die. So that's when you figure out how well you did on your last breath. Let's see how we do. Let me see if there's any other questions here. Phoenix, thank you very much for that. Yes, there's a question here for anybody who wants to go deeper into the Buddhist teachings, and maybe what you're alluding to is the mythology and everything here on the mountain. I'm putting here the link to the Kurama seminar, what I've been called, I think, a very, very fitting title, Mountain of Darkness, Mountain of Light. And this is an upcoming seminar here that I'm going to be leading on a very, very deep discussion on Kurama Mountain. So it's going to go into the mythology, the Buddhist connections, the stories, what all of these deities mean, what they look like, all of the big, big, big backgrounds, the connectivity behind the whole story. So if anybody's interested, you can definitely check that out there. All right, any other questions? Very, very happy to keep chatting for another 10 minutes or so. Helen.
Hi, the way you explain chokure, scan the body doing chokure, I'm not familiar with it. It's my first time joining you guys on a seminar like this, so I never been taught that way. Can you explain to me how you scan the body with your chokure?
Absolutely. So if we look at the symbol itself, and forgive me, I don't have a diagram of it here, but I'm sure many of you can picture it or you're familiar with it. We've got the left bar of chokure coming over, and then there's the horizontal, right? Sorry, the vertical, excuse me, the vertical line in the center, and then the spiral, right? So that vertical line in the center, that's your spine, okay? And every time the spiral goes over the body, it's going, so the vertical line goes all the way down to the root, and then it spirals up to the crown, and then it spirals back down to the sacral, and then up to the third eye, and then down to the solar plexus, up to the throat, and stops at the heart in the very center of the body. So the way that I utilize that, this is just me, and it'll probably resonate with a lot of you, but maybe some of you it won't. I'm very, very physical in the body. I'm very acutely aware of my physical form. It's very easy for me to feel into the body, for better or worse. And so as I bow in Gaoshao, you won't be able to see this for the video, but literally what I do is I roll my eyes in that spiral pattern of chokure. And so I'll mimic it with my fingers here, like left eye and right eye. As it moves up here, then it's like my awareness is rising up, so maybe to the crown or whatever. And then as I spiral them down, it's like my awareness in my physical form goes down to the root. And then my eyes will roll back up, and then it will roll here. So it's essentially saying something like this, Helen, like, okay, how's the crown? How's the mind? How's the skull? How's the ears? How's the hips? How are the knees, the feet, the legs? The energy of each one of those energy centers, right? I don't know if you were here when I was saying, but I continue to work in a Chinese medicine clinic. So each one of these energy centers hold emotions, and they hold belief, and they hold elements and all those things, right? I won't get into that here in this talk, but I think about all of those as I scan the body, right? And then once I'm done scanning, we arrive here in Gaoshao Heart Center. That's, to me, that's Seihiki. Scan the body. Okay, now Seihiki. So now let me feel there's that resistance. I felt maybe my knee hurts, my throat's dry, and my left ear hurts. That's not the case right now, but maybe let's just making that stuff up. So then when I'm sitting in Seihiki, I will pay attention to those parts of the body. Like I'll bring all my awareness to the left ear until it stops hurting. And all my attention to my throat until it's not dry anymore. And then all my attention to the knee or whatever I said until that pain is gone. And then that is Seihiki, because we found balance, right? And now we go on to Honjaze Shomen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
My pleasure.
That's beautiful. Ching. I wish I would have known that before.
Well, you know it now. So there we are. So it's perfect. Yeah, it's beautiful. I've got some other people still joining in here. Anybody else with any questions?
Bruce, I asked about intention. How do you believe that there's intention when we do the Reiki?
Thank you, Elaine. Yes, I saw that there, and thank you for voicing in on that. No, for me, no, I don't believe in any intention, because that's still in my mind, right? So I get asked this question all the time: what do we do then in a Reiki session? And maybe this is going to resonate with a lot of you. I know this happens to me all the time. I might have, some sort of an awareness, or like a download, or whatever you want to call it, of something that the person may or may not need to know as a client. Maybe I get an idea that, I'm sitting here and maybe I get a voice telling me that Elaine, her ankle is inflamed. Okay, fine. That's still in my mind. So if it keeps coming up, what I say to myself is, if she needs to know that, let her know that, not me. I'm holding space, right? So my intention in each and every one of my sessions is to be as neutral as possible, right? It's not to be aware of what the person is going through. Quite often people ask, like, especially when I'm doing face-to-face sessions, there's intake questionnaires and there's all that type of stuff. That's to build rapport. I don't want to necessarily know. In an ideal world, I wouldn't know at all what the person is going through, because we don't need to know that. My goal as a Reiki practitioner, like I was saying at the beginning of the call, imagine if my client is facing up or moving into and then subsequently facing an aspect of darkness, of trauma, right, of whatever, then I want to be the neutral practitioner who is, metaphorically speaking, standing behind them with my hands at their back to catch them if they fall, right? To be the energy or the feeling or the sensation that they can rest back onto if they need a moment to pause, right? But they have to take the steps. We can't do that for them. So intention would be suggesting that I can perhaps take somebody else's steps. But in reality, I think the intention from Reiki is to focus on Ansen Ritsume, a quiet mind, simply being, just being present.
Thank you. But I've heard you say that because I did watch that video that you did, but there's so many people that say, oh, you start with an intention of perhaps healing the person. And I don't buy that myself, but I was curious to hear what you were going to say. So thank you again.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think we would all be doing everybody a service if our intention was neutrality, right? How could I be, let me put it like this. Again, I don't know how this position would, this is what I would suggest that each and every one of you say, if you're comfortable in saying this, when people are saying like, we need to have intentions, we need to pull things out of people or heal them or do this, or move this energy or use chokure or all the things that we hear in the Reiki world. Okay. There is no possible way that I can be more fully present for somebody, my client, for instance, than if I'm fully neutral in myself, right? If I'm fully neutral in my mind, my body, and my soul, then that means whatever the person goes through on the table, my neutrality will always, hopefully, be there. Not judging, not believing, not giving story, not dictating, not governing, not directing, not with superstition and belief and magical powers and guru, like all this type of stuff, but simply resting with the person. That's it, right? There's no, in my opinion, there's no greater form of love and care than neutrality, right? Because anything else is a belief. Yeah. Alita, you have a question?
Hi, Bruce, thank you for this and how you explaining the intention part, because to me, sometimes I find it very, like it puts a lot of pressure on the practitioner when people comes, like you're gonna set the intention for them. To me, if I'm putting intention, I'm trying to control the narrative or trying to control the outcome. And it's not what it is. Reiki is just to let flow. And the person or the client is the one who has to have that intention, because they themselves, they are the healers for themselves. I'm just holding space and facilitating their journey, but it's not my place to try to control the narrative.
Right. Exactly. Think about the precept, just for today, I will do my work honestly. Right? Well, I don't see how we can answer or follow that precept if we are stuck in belief. Right? Even if I had if I was 100% certain that I am able to feel or see or sense or heal or do something about somebody else, who is certain? I am certain, which means Bruce is certain, which means my ego is certain, which means my mind is the thing that's creating the story, which means I'm not certain. So automatically, by definition, I'm not following the precepts. I'm not doing my work honestly, right? That's it, in my opinion. And in Japan, when we practice Reiki, it looks very different. It looks very, very, very different. You know, nobody's crying, nobody on the table, nobody's like going into spasms or having these crazy body experiences. People are just neutral. They're just there. They're having difficult journeys. People are feeling the boyo-san. They're feeling the areas that need help, but we simply hold it and let go, right? And then if it's too much, you stop. That's it. No problem. You just come back the next time and the next time. We don't need to discuss what it is, because if we discuss it, oh my God, I felt this thing in my heart or whatever. You just let go of that, and now you're discussing it. So it's like you're pulling it back in. You're bringing the story back. So just let go. Let go. Where is it? No, it's gone. It doesn't exist. right? Do your work honestly. Helen.
I had the two masters. One was saying that you need the person's permission to send Reiki through distance before working on the body or whatever. And the other one is saying the opposite. You're just sending love or being in that moment, right? So I just want to know your take on that.
Yeah, asking people permission, I don't believe in any of that. And I wouldn't even believe in the idea of not asking permission. The way that I do distance Reiki is like this: get quiet, get relaxed in the body and the mind, right? Let's say I was working on you, Helen. Let's say we were having a session. This is literally how my sessions go. If my mind and my body and everything about me are quiet, right? I'm not looking at you now, but I have a general idea in my memory of what you look like. Gray hoodie, yellow shirt or something like that. So that's enough. And I know your name. So I would say this session is for the best or the benefit of Helen or whatever. And then neutral. That's it. This is assuming you've paid for the session or you're doing a session with me. If it is just in general for somebody in general, then just give Reiki to yourself. If you are quiet, then you're automatically giving Reiki to all things. It's like the part of the sutra that I was talking about. If they obtain enlightenment, if I obtain enlightenment, but they haven't, then may I never obtain enlightenment because my focus is wrong, right? If we want to send Reiki to the war in Ukraine, for instance, then send Reiki to yourself because you are the war in Ukraine, right? Because, and I'll put it this way, I'm not trying to be callous, right? But I don't think any of you are in the war right now, right? We know what's happening. We know that there's suffering. We know that there's pain. We know that there's all of that stuff, but all of that's in our mind, right? Even if we were there in the middle of the battlefield, you see monks doing this, and it's very, very beautiful. They can walk right into battle and be oblivious to the idea that they might die because they've superseded the idea of the war. They're at peace in the middle of the hurricane, right? In the storm. So if you want to send Reiki to somebody else, send it to yourself. So you don't have to ask permission at all, right? When I work with people via distance, people who have a fluency in Reiki, it's very, very beautiful because you and I, Helen, we might connect. Okay, we're here, wait ready for the session. Helen, are you comfortable? You can lie down, you do whatever you want, wherever you're going to be. I will call you back in 45 minutes to let you know that the session's over and how did it go. In those 45 minutes, I'm practicing neutrality. And my body, I'm viewing it as a surrogate for yours, as if my hands were on your body, but I'm not thinking about anything, right? And then when we come back, I would simply say, welcome back, Helen. How did you find your session? How did you go? That's it. We're connected automatically by the precepts, by the symbols. Yeah. All right.
Thank you. It's Elaine again. I like that, Bruce. I just want to say one thing as a teacher and as for myself. I find if I ask someone permission, I think it makes them feel better knowing that I want to help them or that I'm interested for their benefit.
Yes.
As opposed to just doing it and not letting them know. There's something psychological, I believe, in helping people. It's like even saying, I want to say a prayer if you're sick. When you tell a person, it helps them more than not just doing it. So
yeah, I agree. And if you heard what I was saying there on the last statement for Helen's question there, I was saying for people who are fluent in Reiki, that's how I would do it. Now, this is a really beautiful point here. If somebody is brand new to Reiki, and imagine, Elaine, if you had no idea what Reiki was and you called me up and you're like, I need a distance session. I'm like, all right, yep. So just, close down your phone, lay down, and I'll call you back in 45 minutes. Like, what are you talking about? What? Like, how does that doesn't seem like it really make any sense. So I completely agree with what you're saying. Like, no, let me bridge that gap of disbelief or of doubt and tell you what we're going to do, right? We're still going to surrender, but I completely agree. If somebody needs that, there's no harm in telling them that that's going to happen.
And I like the idea of doing it on yourself as a surrogate. calming yourself down, and then they feel it as well. Thank you. This has been wonderful.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. I'm very glad it's helped.
And I was a kindergarten teacher and will always be a teacher, and you will always be a teacher.
Once a teacher, always a teacher. Yep, that's my main hat. My secondary hat is a healer, I guess, or a Reiki practitioner. But teacher at heart, always have been, always will be. Thank you very much. All right, anybody else? Good time for maybe one more question, one or two if they're short. I've got one from Phoenix here if nobody else has anything. Let me answer this because I can answer it pretty quickly. Some people say that certain metals and jewelry can inhibit Reiki flow. So should we take off jewelry? What are your thoughts on that? Everything in the universe is Reiki. So your jewelry is Reiki. There's nothing that can impede the flow or any. Look, I'm wearing bracelets right now. I wear these when I work. That question, and I think every question within the Reiki world, is all doubt in the mind, right? And we know that because, well, I want to say it like this, and yeah, I'm glad that that's what you were thinking as well, Phoenix. Thank you for putting that. Here's what I say when people are like, you need to burn sage, you need to use amethyst for this or that or whatever. Says who? Says the person who told you that that's what sage does, right? Like that's still a belief. We're believing that the thing does what we've been told that it will do. Well, what if we just supersede belief, right? If we're burning sage to clean the room, well, what if we just recognize that there's nothing in the room to clean? It's just in our mind. Everything is in our mind. The entire universe only exists in our mind. If we let go of the mind, then we let go of the need to do anything or suffer. It's part of the precepts. Just for today, do not worry. So you're wearing bracelets, don't worry about it. It's fine, right? That's it. Just let go of it. You forgot to tell somebody, ask them permission about sending Reiki. That's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. Just let go, let go, let go. Ansen Ritsumi all the time. Still mind. Yeah, still mind. And these questions, and I know that all of you have this, like, think how many people are practicing from a mindset that's busy, right? You have to do it like this, this, this. You have to do it like this. I downloaded this. I channeled this. I wear this. I burnt this. I got this crystal. Or just let go. Yeah. All right. Maybe one more question if anybody has it. Nope. Okay, everybody. Well, it's such a pleasure. I've put the link there to my upcoming seminar. I'm also going to share that in the Usui Reiki group. I hope that you've enjoyed this session. I'm going to process the recording here and put it onto YouTube so you can come back to it anytime you wish. I hope it helps your practice. It's such an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much, everybody, for taking this time out of your weekend, for sitting with me, and for diving into the mysteries and teachings of Mount Kurama. I hope to see you on June 10th for my upcoming seminar, where we're going to go way, way, way deeper into that. And as always, keep up with your practice, keep up with the precepts. Thank you so much, everybody. To all of you, be well and in Gosho. Each and every one of you. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody. See you soon.